All right, let's get this out of the way. This will not be a video that will be discussing politics. This is not a political channel. The comments section of this video is not a space for political discourse. I do not care if the candidate that you voted for won or lost. I didn't vote for either of them. If you've jumped onto this video expecting that I'm gonna hammer the snot out of the people or platforms you disagree with, you're gonna be disappointed. If you've jumped onto this video expecting that I'm going to defend the platforms or people that you agree with, you're going to be disappointed. Today, we're going to answer only two simple, important questions. Is Facebook actually censoring Christian voices? And should your church consider jumping on any of these new alternative social media sites? Let's do this. Welcome to Blackbar. Thanks so much for the Patreons who help make this video possible. If you want to learn how to support the channel, check out the link in the description below. Though the sentiment has existed for years, the recent social media bans of former President Donald Trump and other conservative voices has reignited a conversation about censorship on social media, specifically Christian censorship on social media. This is not a video for discussing conservative censorship. Again, this is not a political video. We're not talking about getting censored for demanding tax cuts. We're talking about getting censored for sharing Bible verses. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I'm oblivious to the fact that the Venn diagram of American Christians and conservatives looks more like a baseball than a football, but that is besides the point. A cursory search through Facebook will net you with thousands and thousands of statuses and comments claiming widespread Christian censorship across the entire platform. It's just generally assumed as a fact that Facebook simply goes out of its way to make sure that Christian voices don't get the reach that they actually should. But is that actually true? I have spent days looking through Facebook and articles and comments, prying through the rage bait and the partisan stained sources to get to the facts. Here's what I have found about whether or not your church should be concerned about censorship on Facebook. So, generally speaking, when you post a comment or a status on Facebook, the algorithm has a rough idea of what you're trying to talk about. Yeah, you won't mind helping? Now, as I was saying, when you post a comment or status to Facebook, the algorithm has a rough idea of what you're talking about. It might get the subject matter, maybe an idea of the tone, but as fancy as algorithms and bots go, they really can't judge your intent. Well, at least not yet. Now, if a fellow user swings by your new content on Facebook and takes particular offense to it, they do have a few options available to them. Obviously, there is always the option of a rational, cohesive discussion on the merits and faults of your statements. They can leave a little haha reaction or hide your posts, or if they're feeling particularly indignant, they can report you to Facebook. If they do decide to report you, they can choose from a handful of reasons why, including harassment, false news, hate speech, etc. Enough of these reports in a short window of time, and Facebook will generally lean on the safer side of things and knock your content off their platform. After this happens, you can almost always ask for a manual review from a Facebook employee, but considering how large the platform is, this can take several hours, if not days, for reevaluation. This is, to a large degree, how moderation works on Facebook. Repeat offenders can find that the report threshold for their content being removed shrinks smaller and smaller as their temporary bans extend each time. Now that we have a base understanding of how Facebook's moderation system works, we can talk through what I have found to be the main 3 reasons Christian content is censored on Facebook today. Yes, there is some going on, but maybe not for the reasons you may think. And these are the 3 main reasons why Facebook might remove your content off of their platform. First up, inflammatory and antagonistic content. I'm just going to be blunt with this one. If your social media feed reads like a coked out hellfire preacher from the 1980s intent on changing people's minds by dragging them through the dirt and blaming their sin for the state of the world and their eternal damnation, you don't just deserve to be censored on Facebook, you deserve a kick in the nads. Blanket hateful statements like, "You're a baby killer," "God hates whatever," will almost certainly be regarded as hate speech because that's what it is. Ephesians 4:15 tells us to speak the truth in love. Regardless of what you think truth is, this is not what truth in love looks like. It is hard for me to believe that there are some Christians out there that could read the same book I can and come to the conclusion that acting like a 2 Peter 2:16a is what Jesus was asking of any of us. Speak the truth in love, love thy neighbor, and this particular censorship pitfall will not be a problem for you. Second, misunderstanding Facebook's ad policies. If you've ever tried to run a paid advertisement on Facebook before, you've likely run into Facebook's incredibly strict and occasionally bizarre ad policies. You can't pay Facebook to advertise nudity or illegal products, etc. You also can't have text that takes up too much of the frame for some reason. Bad grammar can even get your ad rejected. They even have a clause for just low-quality ads if you just suck at graphic design. On more than one occasion, Christian influencers and organizations have had their ad rejected for some obscure reason and then claimed that they were being unfairly treated because of their religion. In 2015, the producers of the film I Am a Christian, starring the always wonderful Kevin Sorbo, threw a fit because their Facebook ad promoting the film was rejected for obvious, discriminatory reasons, of course. Right?
Yes!
Well, it turned out that they started the advertisement by asking the question, "Are you a Christian?" breaking one of Facebook's many ad policies.
Disappointed!
Facebook generally doesn't allow advertisements to make assumptions about the viewer's identity. "Are you a Christian?" would break the rules just as much as "Are you black?" or "Are you gay?" But that didn't stop producers from throwing a fit about it, garnering more clicks for their rage bait articles and hopefully a few more ticket sales. Generally speaking, Facebook is not unfairly censoring Christians with their ad policy. As long as you're not being discriminatory or lying or breaking any of Facebook's other ad rules, they will happily take your hard-earned cash to show other people your precious pixels. Number 3, the report bomb. As I alluded to earlier, Facebook really isn't the place for civil discourse, especially on controversial, hotly debated topics. Unfortunately, many users drunk with power utilize the report button as an I disagree button. This is obviously not what the button was intended for, but there's really not much Facebook can do to keep it from being abused. Jumping into the comments of an article that is critical of a Christian perspective with even the most mundane defense can result in a proverbial report dogpile from users who aren't interested in hearing other opinions. Like I said, as long as no rules were actually broken, a manual review of your comment from a Facebook employee will almost always result in the content being restored. But the ban isn't coming as a result of Facebook themselves, but from hostile users looking to squelch dissenting voices. This has nothing to do with Facebook's hidden anti-Christian agenda and has everything to do with the culture we're living in slowly becoming more and more antagonistic to Christian perspectives. Do you know how we don't prevent that from happening? Throwing a fit every time it happens. Don't feed the trolls. Speak truth in love and consider every word carefully. Now, given the assumption that your church isn't posting intentionally inflammatory content, is abiding by Facebook's ad policies, and is not going out of its way to make comments in hostile environments, I firmly believe that there is no reason to worry that your church's Facebook page is going to be censored by the platform. There's not some hidden ghost in the machine shadow banning Christian content and ensuring the gospel isn't preached. They are not going out of their way to take down your church's stream for any other reason than potential copyright infringement, in which they will take you down in a quarter of a second. I mean, look at this practically. Social media sites are not financially incentivized to censor Christian voices. Their algorithms are built to find out what content you like and show you more of that content so you stay on their site longer. Deliberately censoring Christian voices would be prioritizing anti-Christian agendas above their pocketbooks. And I mean, come on. Nothing is above their pocketbooks. I don't care how long you work at a church. Being in here with the lights off is still creepy. Now, this still does leave us with one more question. Widespread censorship or not, should your church be considering developing a presence on some of these new alternative free speech social media sites that have popped up in the past few years? As simply as I can say it, probably not, but maybe. Let's look at this super pragmatically. The content that your church generally posts is going to be for one of two audiences, either your own congregation internally or the community and world around you externally. If the ultimate goal of your church's social media account is to reach the world around you, there are far, far, far more people on Facebook and Instagram than just about anywhere else. We need to be where the people are if we're going to make an impact in their lives. Now, if the ultimate goal of your church's social media account is to communicate with your congregation, then the safest way to do that is by focusing on communication channels that are owned and operated by your church. Develop an email list, hand out a bulletin, maybe even develop your own church app. Depending on a third-party developer like these alternative social media sites does not remove the risk of being censored or deplatformed or disciplined. It just gives the control to a different developer. Whether you're reaching internally or externally, I personally don't believe, from a purely marketing perspective, that these alternative social media sites make a lot of sense given the already limited bandwidth that most churches already struggle with managing the social media accounts that they already use. Now, you might disagree with me, and that's totally fine. Perhaps you're living in a wonderland where bandwidth isn't an issue. Or perhaps you've already had a large portion of your congregation migrating to these sites with or without you. Is it a good idea then? Now, it doesn't take much research to discover that sites like Parler and Gab and MeWe are almost entirely populated by a single political perspective. I'm not entirely opposed to more social media sites with less moderation. I may not be partisan, but I definitely don't like rules. That being said, intentionally or not, how your church interacts with these platforms will say something to your congregation and to the world around you. Having an official presence on these platforms is unfortunately an inherently political statement. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a political opinion, nor am I saying that you shouldn't have the right to express that opinion. But a church having a political opinion, assumed or declared, is a dangerous step towards driving a wedge between you and your congregants, a wedge between your church and the world, or a wedge between your church and its nonprofit status. And on top of that, unfortunately, categorizing the general tone of the content on these sites as just conservative-leaning is not the whole truth. I've made temporary accounts on all of the sites that I could. I've seen the content that gets shared. So much of it, political leaning aside, is intentionally inflammatory, antagonistic, and simply just unkind. I believe that your church's official presence on these sites will not just be interpreted as an endorsement of their political beliefs, but as an endorsement of their tone. Of course, that is ultimately a decision that your leadership needs to make at your church, but I am of the opinion that our witness as Christians is more important than our politics. Right now especially, the world is watching us. The actions we take and the words that we use right now will absolutely affect our impact later. All that being said, all politics aside, I do want to point out one very crucial, important exception. I firmly believe that there is room for ministry on these platforms. Whether they know it or not, many of the antagonistic users of Gab and Parler and MeWe are just as lost as the liberal world that they rally against. A purpose-built, discipleship-focused ministry dedicated to reaching radicalized alt-right or QAnon believers is not just invaluable, it is desperately needed. Gab, Parler, and MeWe need digital missionaries just like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and YouTube do. We need individuals with the heart for those people and an understanding of their culture to be a light in an otherwise very, very dark place. If you believe that you are being called into that kind of ministry, I believe it would be wrong for you not to be in those spaces. The internet is an immensely powerful tool, likely the most powerful machine that humanity has ever built. I believe that it's a tool that can be used for immensely effective ministry if used properly and under the guidance of the Spirit. Regardless if you're on Facebook or not, if you're jumping onto any of these new alternative media sites or not, remember that your neighbor is not just the people down the street. It's not just the people you agree with, but it's the people in your comment sections, your interest groups, and even the people that disagree with you. God bless. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Blackbar. If you haven't already, make sure to check out the Blackbar podcast, released every single week, where we go more into depth into the topics we talk about in these videos. In addition, if you would like to join the Blackbar volunteer team and help make content or help other struggling churches on our Discord, make sure to check out the link in the description below. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.